on today's episode, we have a very special guest, David Obeda, who is a content creator for the TFS podcast. Welcome to the show, David. How are you this morning?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. Love the setup. Awesome.
Now, thank you for coming into our humble studio. This is where we film everything, but I'm so excited for this because I love your content online. I've seen it, how you go to different hoods in all of Auckland, and you just explore the streets, which is pretty cool. And your views are crazy. Like you're averaging like 50 to 80K viewers on your videos. But welcome to the show. Thank you for coming on. And just wanted to open up the table to tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, again, I appreciate you having me on. It's a blessing to be here. I actually saw you on YouTube as well, and I liked what you guys did too. So I gave you a follow on Instagram.
Yes, thank you so much.
Yeah, I thought, that's awesome work that you're doing. So, yeah, my name's David Obeda. My mum's Cook Island from Raro. My dad's Māori, Pākehā. He whakapapa's back up north. Most people would know me for my social media. Also know me as a 501 deportee. So I came back and I was deported from Australia after living about half my life there. I went there as a teenager to I was getting into like a little bit of trouble here. So got kicked out, went to Australia to live with my mum. And unfortunately, things didn't really change. I went over there and got involved in the street life and the crime life. But yeah, I'm from here in New Zealand originally, grew up here. I was originally from Tukoro. Always went back and forth from there. I moved around a little bit. Moved to West Auckland, so I was a Westie. I've also lived in Beach Haven on the shore there, which is where I live currently at the moment too. I'm not one of those guys that come from like a very violent upbringing. I'm not one of those guys that came from poverty or things like that. I actually had quite a blessed upbringing. Solo mother. A lot of the times my mum worked 2 jobs to support us. So yeah, a lot of alone time, I guess, as well, growing up. But yeah, I mean, we never went without, to be honest. And that's one thing I put out there as well, that not everyone that ends up in prison or ends up in that sort of a background actually comes from, a traumatic upbringing or a place of, violence and things. I knew quite a few people in prison that didn't come from that upbringing. So yeah, I did have a blessed upbringing, pretty religious upbringing. So I grew up in the church, but it was sort of one of those, standard, like pretty much don't have a choice, come to church or get a hiding,
Yeah.
So it was that sort of an upbringing, which is probably why as soon as I got to the age where I didn't need to go anymore, or like I couldn't be dragged there anymore, I just stopped going. And I guess growing up, yeah, like I said, I had a blessed upbringing. Loved my mum, she provided for us. Yeah, I mean, my mum had a pretty rough upbringing herself, coming from Raro. So I guess nowadays, looking back, I really respect my mum. She was like a rock that was always there, and obviously doing interviews and interviewing all of these people and seeing their rough upbringings, and how a lot of these guys I interviewed, they didn't even have a first chance in life, let alone getting a second chance. So yeah, very thankful for my mum. My dad also was a very hard worker. Like both my parents worked hard, especially my dad. But my dad was a ward of the state, so he was taken away from his family as a child, and he gave me a lot better than what he had, even though it was solo mum sort of thing. But love my dad. Like, me and my dad are best friends. I see him almost every day. We're always kicking it. But yeah, I guess growing up, and he knows, he was quite harsh at times. Quite harsh with his words. And he's apologized for that nowadays. But yeah, I guess growing up, it definitely didn't help my self-esteem and, really low self-confidence. So, but yeah, very blessed upbringing.
Yeah.
I guess one of the changing moments for me, I guess, is when my mum sort of met someone. So she ended up getting married, and he was quite like abusive, especially like verbally. So he was like Pākehā, not getting into the whole race thing or anything like that, but yeah, he was Pākehā and he was quite racist. He was quite a racist person. So go figure on that one, what I mean, marrying an islander and being racist.
Yeah.
But I guess my mum as well, growing up, she was quite, I guess because of the upbringing she had in Raro, like my mum took off from Raro as soon as she was able. She saved up and gapped it, as a teenager, because of things that she had gone through over there. So growing up, it wasn't really a cultural home, you know what I mean? Like, my mum didn't teach me nothing about like the Cook Islands or Raro or anything like that. Like, if anything, she was like, turned her back on all of that, so I didn't grow up like knowing much about my culture, which I guess I really did want to know though growing up. Like, I really wanted to know about my Raro side and things, but yeah, my mum wasn't into it. So I guess that sort of turned me into like sort of wanting to do bad things as well, because I don't know, that's sort of like a common misconception type thing growing up, they're like, Māoris and Islanders are like doing crime, and like the majority are like into gangs and stuff. So even though I didn't come from that background, I guess that's what made me like, oh well, maybe that's my culture, you know what I mean? Like getting into trouble and like hanging with those sorts of people, and like, yeah, growing up, my mum wasn't a drinker or a smoker. My dad was a smoker, but yeah, to be honest, I used to hate like weed and stuff like that growing up when I was young, only because my mum didn't like it, and I could see her always sort of arguing with my dad over it. So that's why I always used to hate it. But then, yeah, getting older, and then I started getting into smoking weed. But yeah, I guess when my stepdad entered the picture, it did become, like, it pretty much really changed my life when that happened. Yeah, I mean, it did get to the point where I didn't feel, like later on in the teenage years, like you don't feel comfortable in the house, and always being told, like he used to call me a coconut, like just stupid stuff like that, and so yeah, that definitely wasn't good, growing up in a home like that. So yeah.
That's so interesting, because that's a common narrative people have about gangsters. Like, they're all from poverty, they're all from homes that are abusive. And I'm don't get me wrong, there's probably a lot of members or gang members who do come from that background. But yours is particularly interesting because, you say you have a good background, you come from a family who gave you the best that they had at that time, and it was well. So you felt a sense of belonging and cultural belonging with gangs?
Yeah, no, well, exactly. And then, yeah, just that common misconception, I guess, you know what I mean? That Islanders and Māoris are inclined to, be criminals and all of this sort of stuff. And like, even looking back now, even in my time in prison, and even when I was younger and I used to go around the boys' houses and stuff, and there's drinking, broken family type situations, and sometimes the boys would come back to my house and be like, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, you got it all good here, you know what I mean? And so, yeah. So, but yeah, like I said, it wasn't perfect, you know what I mean? So there was still, like with my stepdad and that, there was a lot there, having to run away from home and doing all that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you've been in prison. What was that like for you?
I guess when I first went into youth justice, like in my late teens, because even when I was like because I went to Australia, like I was getting into bits of trouble here in New Zealand, like breaking into houses and sort of just experimenting, I guess you could say. But then when I went to Australia as a teenager, I started running away from home, and then in the area that I lived, there was a lot of, you know, little islander kids that were sort of in the same situation, running away from home. So I sort of hung out with them, and like I wasn't like this tough, you know, guy on the streets. You know what I mean? If anything, I used to get picked on, really. I was always the skinny one, you know, and yeah, so, but then I guess that's why when I went to prison eventually and did start to like bulk up and, you know, start hitting the chin up bar, that all changed, you know. But yeah, as a younger teenager, yeah, I was just like just one of those little criminals, you know what I mean? Like just a little hood rat that would just
were you like committing crime for like money, or was it
oh
just
yeah, for money, like yeah, definitely for money and stuff, especially when you start running away from home and, you know, staying at this house and that house. And yeah, like yeah, as a teenager, I remember I just used to wake up every morning, hop on my bike, and just go look for a house to break into or some form of crime to, you know, supply also my habits though, you know, being drinking
and to give back to the house that you're staying at.
Yeah, even that. But yeah, I think, you know, because I was an alcoholic as a teenager and quite a heavy weed smoker, and then going on to harder drugs. So yeah, that was definitely a part of it. And I guess, yeah, when I first started getting locked up, I don't know, yeah, it just felt like this is where I'm meant to be at. You know, like, oh yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously when you're involved in that life, that's pretty much where you're gonna end up.
But know? Like, you know, when you're doing it, are you like, in the back of your mind, are you like, I'm just gonna end up in prison?
Oh, you definitely don't want to, but oh, you know, because on the streets, prison is sort of seen as like a badge of honor type thing as well. And like by that point, as a young person, like almost all my friends had been locked up. You know, there wasn't anyone that hadn't done some form of time, either juvie or prison. Yeah, so pretty much everyone had been inside. So by the time I did go to prison, like mainstream prison, like I had heaps of mates in there. You know, which sort of led to the gang thing as well. But yeah, like I went in there and like just knew heaps of people in there, you know. So
was it like all good? Were you actually like okay with going to prison because your mates were there?
Oh, like it sucked. Don't get me wrong. Yeah, it sucked. But like as soon as I got there, I was just training every day.
Yeah.
Like I think the first sentence I did was I got sentenced to 12 months, and by the time I got out on parole, like I'd put on like 30 kilos and like looked completely different, you know. So yeah, it's obviously a place I didn't want to be, but because at the same time I was so lost though, you know what I mean? Like no purpose. Even as a teenager, you know, like I hated life, you know, like just thinking, is this it? You know what I mean? Like what a crap life, you know, like life's crap. There's nothing to look forward to. You know, robbing and stealing every day, you know, like that was just that just became an everyday thing. And you know, it's a hard case because like I said, I didn't come from that sort of upbringing, you know. I had a blessed upbringing, but yeah, it just goes to show like even nowadays I see some youth and stuff like that and work with some youth. Man, you see some youth out there that are doing some bad stuff, you know, worse than what I was doing at that age. And you go back to their house, some of them, and it's like a double story, like mansion sometimes, you know, like not, you know, like they're actually like well off. And then you can see sort of like money's not everything, you know what I mean? Because a lot of these kids, they've got no parents. Or like they got parents, but they're like never around.
Yeah.
Like there's no sort of connection at all. So they're like looking for attention, I guess. But yeah, so sometimes there's no rhyme or reason to why someone would end up like in a life of crime.
Reasons,
yeah, everyone has a different reasons, and sometimes you might see that like white picket fence house, but it's, you know, who knows what's going on behind the scenes, you know. So, but yeah, so I ended up in prison. I mean, all up, I served seven years. Did 3 sentences. Before I was deported. The last sentence I did was a bit over 4 years.
What kind of like what made you want to change? Was there like a specific situation?
So when I went to prison, like I said, I went to prison. There was no purpose at all of my life. Just a petty criminal. Um, but then going to prison and then, in a sense, finding purpose in there, you know, because I had a lot of boys in there. Long story short, we ended up forming a prison gang while I was in prison, um, and it rose quite quickly, um, to the point where we started making the newspaper in Melbourne for things that we were doing in there. So because of that, I found myself in like pretty like high security units, while what they would consider like supermax. So at the age of 20, I went into supermax for the first time, and it was the same thing. You know, I remember walking in there just thinking like, yeah, you know what I mean, like this is mad, you know, even though I was like going through hell, you know what I mean, because you're in supermax, you're in solitary confinement, there's a camera in the cell, you can't even leave your cell without like being escorted by like 6 guards, like shackled up, the whole thing, people screaming, you know, people losing the plot in there, because they're designed to break you. You know what I mean? So you see a lot of people break there. I have a lot of mates who have broken down in there and ended up getting like full blown schizophrenia just from the isolation. So you see it all. So I found myself in those units quite regularly. I think the longest time I spent in there was about 18 months. But see, like looking back now, that really helped me like with the show, you know, because I met because I do the hood tours and stuff like that, but it all started through interviews and stuff. I was interviewing a lot of boys, and because when you're in those sorts of units, you do find yourself around, I guess, what they would consider like underworld figures. You know, they don't really look at them like that, you know, when you're in there. But yeah, I guess on the outside, they would consider these people, well, you know, like bikie presidents and all of this sort of stuff, and like Lebanese sort of crime figures, and that. Like, I found myself around those sorts of people. And then also when we formed our own gang and things, and then rising quite quickly, that also, I met a lot of people through that. So when I started the show, it was like so easy for me to like reach out to these guys, and especially like the ones who had sort of I knew had left. You know what I mean? So I knew quite a few presidents that had sort of stepped down, and I was like, bro, can I interview you? And you know, all of this stuff. And they were like, yeah, bro, all good. So I was like, yeah. So, but yeah, so that's pretty much what my time consisted of. A lot of things that, yeah, I don't want to say regret, but like I look back and can't help but feel a bit like, oh, you know, like, because I got a lot of friends right now who should be out right now, but who are still in there for doing things whilst in prison and getting extra time, and yeah, a lot of mates who have like got mental illnesses now and stuff because of like the long terms and the long stretches in solitary confinement. Yeah, it's pretty sad to think of now, but in a sense that gives me strength as well to like keep pushing, you know what I mean, and give them something like, fuck, look at this guy, you know, like he's doing something different. So yeah, I guess in that sense, you know, I got a lot of people cheering for me, and you know, like well, want to see me make it and stuff like that. Like I even get like officers from prison, you know, to be reaching out, and they're just like, wow, like this guy, you know, like good on you, you know, like. So yeah, I guess I'm doing it for all of them as well, all of the brothers, and like even now the boys reach out and they're like tripping, you know.
So it's that time in solitary confinement you really had time to think about.
Yes, well, so with the change and stuff, so towards about the last year of my sentence, or 18 months, I had some pretty just things were going on in my personal life. A lot of things were going down, and really nothing at all to do with prison life in itself, but the things that were going on in my personal life, like it was like breaking me, you know, and because like, it got to the point where I didn't want to talk to anyone anymore. And because the thing is, when you're in prison and things are happening on the outside, you've got no control because you're in there, so you're just stuck in there, just like dwelling on stuff. So it got pretty dark towards the end there, where they did break me, and because by that point as well, like, the system and the prison itself had like no love for me because of all the stuff that they reckoned I was doing or like orchestrating, you know what I mean? So they were making it even tougher too, you know what I mean? Like, because they would just put me into solitary confinement, and things like that, because they hated me, you know what I mean? Like, they really didn't like me, so so they did break me, you know what I mean, for sure. But looking back now, it was just what I needed, I guess, in the greater purpose of it all. But yeah, so was going through personal battles, and then on top of that, getting deported as well. You know what I mean? Like, knowing I'm going to be sent back to New Zealand. And that's a whole nother battle in itself, because like, I didn't want to come back here. I didn't think I'd ever come back to New Zealand. Wasn't interested at all in coming back here. So there were all these battles that I was going through, and to the point where like I didn't even think I was going to get out of there. Like, I thought I was going to nick myself. There were nights in the cell, I'd have the rope there, a rope like made out of plastic bags type thing, and I used to just like sit there and just like put it around my neck, and just like, I could never work up the, and that's how I just used to sit there, just thinking like, fuck. But like, now I look back on all of those moments, like, God was right there with me that whole time, and giving me just enough strength, to make her through. But yeah, it got to the point where I didn't think I was going to get out. But then when I did come back here, when I got deported, then it was just like, just struggle street, came back here. Praise God, like, my dad was here, so went and lived with my dad. And, I'm so grateful for that. But even that wasn't the best living situation. My dad, who's the man, but, he was flatting, so we had to share the same room, and, I was just crashing out on the floor, and, like, what that does to a man, like, coming back, I think I was like 26, 27, so I'm like a grown man, and I'm having to like share a room with my old man, and I've got nothing, coming back with nothing, no money. I'm coming back a drug addict as well, because...
Hard to find work?
Yeah, well, that was my main saving grace, was the work part, so I came back. So yeah, to continue, so there's all this stuff going through my head. I'm coming back, brokenhearted. I've also got like a mad drug habit, because the whole time I was in prison, like, I was a pretty heavy like drug user. So coming back here, getting back onto the drugs again, I guess to self-medicate as well though, drinking every day. But yeah, so I was able to get work. So I think I wasn't even back here a week, and I was already working.
Oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, straight up. Like, even though I was like super depressed.
Yeah.
Like, that just pushed me though. You know what I mean? Like if you had seen me in that time, like, you would have thought I was all good. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't showing any of that, because obviously in prison, like, you learn to hide everything, and just be emotionless. So coming back and getting into the workforce, it was like, yeah, I got to get out of the situation, like, I need to like get my money up, and I need to like hard and fast, you know what I mean? Like, I'm working every single day, you know what I mean, Monday to Sunday. But also it was a coping mechanism as well, because like, I remember when we would have days off, I used to be like spewing, I'll be gutted, because I'll be like, oh, there's nothing to do now, like, because then I'll just start drinking. If I wasn't working, as soon as I wake up, I'd be like cracking a can for breakfast.
Yeah.
It's just the emotions, like, I'll start getting overwhelmed. So that's why I started getting into drug use but working though, you know, because when I came back here, I was like, well, it's only doing drugs. Like, that's nothing, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not like a crime, like, well, you know, I
Mm.
didn't look at it as like I'm committing a crime. So, and it was also self-medicating and making things easier for me. But yeah, like I said, it was a pretty tough situation coming back here. Like, it was, there was a lot of meth, you know what I mean? Like, around me. You know what I mean? So a lot of people in the area and things like this, like, were using meth and stuff like that. So got into the meth use and yeah. But when I came back here, because I was in that broken phase of getting out of jail, I knew that I didn't want to go back to prison. Like, that was the 100%. Like, I ain't going back to jail.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I didn't think I'll make it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I thought if I go back to jail this time, like, I'm definitely not gonna make it out, you know, like, I was just so destroyed. So but the thing is, like, so when I came back, all I knew were other criminals, especially other deportees, because obviously there was a massive wave of deportees. So like, when I came back here, like, even now, most of the people that I was locked up with, Pacific Islander or Māori, I'd say over 90% are back here now, if they're not out of jail. You know, if they're still in jail, that's different. But most that have gotten out since then are all back here now. So it's like a massive wave, you know. So when I came back here, I only knew other deportees and boys that were involved in that sort of a life. So that was basically who I surrounding myself with. But like, just working though, you know, like, I ended up moving in with the boys, and like, things were mad, you know. I was like, well, like, physically things were good, you know what I mean? Like, we started our own business and doing furniture moving and working every day, like I said, and like, able to like communicate and mingle and do the business stuff like quite easily. But yeah, obviously on the inside though, way, like, I'm like completely broken though. But yeah, outwardly though, it's all good. Moved in with the boys, living in a mad place like in Long Bay, you know what I mean?
Oh,
So
that's so
like,
cool.
right on the beach, you know, so like, everything's all good. Like, but you know, the thing was, I just stuck at my work, you know what I mean? Like, even though all the boys around me were doing whatever, like, all of those boys, almost all of them, ended up in jail, you know what I mean, for like drug imports and things like this. But I just stayed at work, you know what I mean? I just kept working. But yeah, but then ended up burning myself out. Burnt myself out and got heavily more into the drug use. Yeah, just became a junkie, really. I was already a junkie, but now I'm just a junkie. Like, I'm not a working junkie, or I'm just a bottom of the barrel junkie now. And I guess that's where things really changed, you know, because I came back the start of 2019. So by the time well, it was when COVID happened. That was really when my massive changes happened. And but like, looking into that period, I'm so grateful, like, because even coming back, you know, I had all the offers, you know what I mean, to jump on this club and, you know, come around, hang out at the gym with the boys, and, you know, I mean, all know what that means, you know what I mean, like, you know, you can come around with the boys and join, and, you know, like, I had clubs offering me a patch straight up, you know, like, bro, we got a patch here right for you right now if you want it. And I'm like, because I was so broken inside though. Like, outwardly I'm looking all good, but because I was so broken inside, I'm like, oh, nah, thanks, man, but nah, you know, like, I'm too, you know, like, I'm too all over the place, like. So, but yeah, then COVID happened, and that's when it all changed for me. Like, just that time of isolation and introspection and stuff. It's just basically where I started like hearing the voice of God, pretty much. Yeah. And God was telling me like that he had a plan, you know. He's like, because to me, like, God doesn't speak like audibly. not that you can actually hear a voice, because then you'll think you're going nuts, you know what I mean? If you started like hearing an audible voice. But to me, God speaks to us through like revelations, you know what I mean, and insights. And it's like, oh, where did that thought come from? You know, where did that? Man, I don't usually think about that. So like that sort of speaking to me, you know. And through these revelations, it was like, I've actually got a real big plan for you. You know what I mean? Like you're actually special. You know what I mean? And it's time for you to wake up. You know, and I just ran with it, eh? Like, I didn't know what God was going to do for me. Like, see, now, like, looking at what's happened since then, it's like, man, like, he actually pulled through, you know what I mean? Like, tenfold of what I thought he was going to do. Like, I never thought, like, I'll walk down the street one day and, like, people would know, like, my face in that, you know? That's why there's no doubt in my mind, like, about God, because everything that, all those revelations I had back then, God like pulled through on it, you know, and I just went with it. So yeah, started the podcast. That's a story in itself. Like, I had a bro, Mark, so he always gets a shout out because of he had a podcast, and he actually ended up interviewing me on it. And I remember watching like podcasts and things and thinking like, coming from like a background of crime and like gangs and stuff, most people would know that it's real, like, you don't really say much, if anything at all, you know what I mean? Like, you just don't talk about anything, you know? So when I started like watching these podcasts and seeing like people talking and stuff, and people who are like proper too, like when you look into their backgrounds, it's like, wow, this dude was like about that life, you know what I mean? And now look at him, he's like talking about all this sort of stuff, like, you know, just his feelings and stuff like that. It was like I loved it, eh? Like, I just thought, man, this is on, you know, like, you know, this is cool. So then it wasn't long before I was like, man, I could do that. You know, like, I could interview people. If I met that many people in jail.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're so like, well connected to a world that everyone is curious about, that everyone wants answers from. So can definitely see the alignment there.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Like, it was all for a purpose. And so how it started was one of the boys got out of jail, and he's from Reba, but he was, we were cellmates in Australia, so he had moved to Australia, and so we were cellmates, and he was a real good friend. And that was my first interview. That interview's not up anymore, but I've got a few interviews that aren't up anymore from back in those days. Like, because like he got out of jail, and I'm like, bro, can I interview? You know what I mean? Like, and he's like, yeah, all good. Keeping in mind that I didn't have a platform at that point, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like a big deal, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, oh, thinking like, oh, heaps of people are gonna watch it. Like, it's just like, bro, can I bring my GoPro and interview? Like, he's like, yeah, all good. So we did it, hopped in his garage and set up the GoPro, had like a, 10-20 minute conversation, and yeah, I posted it up. It sat there for a bit, and then all of a sudden, like, I started to see the views go up, and then it's like 10K, like 20K,
Crazy.
like 30K, and I'm like watching it.
You're like 120 now.
Yeah. It got to like the views kept going up, and I was like, far out. Like, people are actually interested in this stuff, you know, and so that was a crack up interview though, because like he ended up going back to jail because he was on bail, so he got sentenced. He went back to jail. And he like calls me from jail away, and he's like, bro, like, I walk like, like sort of like not angry, but he's like, bro, like, I'm going into jail, and then he was like, all the officers like recognized me, they're like, oh bro, that was a good interview, and like he's like tripping out. He's like, oh bro, I didn't know it was gonna be like that, like. So that was the hard case thing as well, because a lot of those original interviews I did, because I think I did a few interviews, and I think the next really popular one was one of the boys. He was the president for the Hells Angels, or a chapter of the Hells Angels in Melbourne, who was a good friend of mine as well, and I had reached out to him, like, bro, can you jump on this podcast? But again, like there was no platform at that point. So he's just like, yeah, bro, I'll jump on. Like no one's gonna watch it anyway, you know what I mean? Like barely anyone's gonna see it.
Yeah.
And then we did that interview. And then that one, you know, went viral and stuff. And then they did a news article and stuff like that. Because, you know, he was the president of the... But that's when I realized, like, because when I was in jail with these guys, I never looked at them like, oh, this guy's like a president of a club. And because when you're in jail, everybody's like sort of the same in there. You know what I mean? Like, that's why you can get like people who are like pretty much bums out on the street, like junkies and that. And then you see them in prison and they're like running it, you know what I mean? Like they're running the unit and everything, you know what I mean? Because like just institutionalized, I guess, then, you know, but you get heaps of people like that in there, you know, like someone you meet in jail and they're like big, ripped, you know what I mean? Like running it, slanging, doing all the moves and stuff. And then you see them on the outside and they're like boned down and like, you know, like all of, you know, junkies and that, you know, and it's like, wow, like, that's the thing. So when you go to jail, it's like, yeah, like everyone's sort of on the same level, really. You know what I mean? So when I used to meet these guys, I never really thought of them as like, oh, this guy's like a hectic bikie, like, or anything like that. But then when I started interviewing these guys, then I realized, like, man, like out here, people actually think like, oh, like, wow, you know, like this dude was the president of a motorcycle club. So that's when I realized, like, oh, I'm actually like onto something here.
Exactly.
You know, and then I got another president who was also the president of another Hells Angels chapter, Joey Tangaloa, and I interviewed him. And then that one was quite popular as well. And then it just went from there. Yeah, I just kept interviewing these boys. But yeah, that was the hard case thing, because I think a lot of those original ones, they didn't actually realize that like heaps of people are going to end up watching it. They just probably thought like, oh, yes. Yeah. I'll just jump on your show, bro. And it all ended up being positive and stuff like that. And they all had like real positive messages and whatnot.
And I think you're in a really unique position, because I know a lot of mainstream media have tried to do series and shows on like gang, but they won't accept their stories onto mainstream. And I understand why, because they're always misrepresented. So, where you're positioned is very unique, because they trust you to tell their stories properly, which is awesome.
Like I think the podcast has had like a huge ripple effect, because it's definitely normalized people jumping on podcasts that come from that life. Like nowadays you see patch members jumping on podcasts. Like I've had patch members like jump on the podcast, like you see patch members doing podcasts and things like that and doing interviews. So yeah, it's definitely like changed the game up and made that a bit more normal. But like because originally, like because I came back from Australia, I only really knew people from over there. So a lot of my original interviews were either from deportees or people who still lived in Australia. So, but then as time went on, like I got a lot of OGs from here in New Zealand start to reach out to me, you know what I mean? And like some high ranking gang members here as well. And they were like, oh man, love the show, man. Like you want to catch up for coffee? And then, you know, catch up for coffee. And oh bro, I actually know a few guys that you might want to interview. And then I started like moving on to New Zealand, you know what I mean? And getting all of these interviews here. Like I remember in the beginning stages when I was mainly interviewing people in Australia, people used to be like, oh bro, you should interview like a mongrel mob, you know, or something like that. And I used to be like, I don't know any, you know what I mean? I don't know any mongrel mob. Like now I know heaps though, you know what I mean? So it's hard case. But yeah, back then I was like, oh, I don't know anyone, you know? So it's definitely like, it's surprising, like, because like interviewing like a lot of ex-gang members. I interview gang members and stuff, but obviously sometimes it's a bit more hard with gang members, because they do have certain rules. Certain clubs have certain rules of what they can and they can't do. But I think, you know, interviewing so many ex-gang members, because I get like, sometimes people are like, bro, the gangs must hate you, bro, like for interviewing so many like ex-members and stuff like that. Like, man, you must be like in danger, you know what I mean, type thing. But like, to be honest, like, man, I get a lot of love, you know what I mean, from a lot of like the high-ranking members, like especially the high-ranking members, like they reach out and they're like, bro, like mad work, you know what I mean? Like that's awesome what you do, man.
Do you reckon those high-ranking gang members, they just want good for anyone
Oh
who's
yeah,
in and
that's
out?
a huge part of it. Yeah, because they've already been there, done that. You know what I mean? So they want those more positive changes for people. And I think, like, even in Australia, like, I get a lot of people who are like deep like in that life, you know what I mean? Like really like, it's like some of these guys, you can make movies about their lives, you know what I mean? Just hectic stories, and who are still deep in the game, like reach out to me a message and they're like, bro, keep going. You know what I mean? Like, keep doing what you're doing. Tell these young people that this life ain't what it seems. Even though they're in that life, they're like messaging me and telling me, like, keep going. Tell the youth that it's not what it's made out to be. And that what like really gave me a push as well, to hear that from like these hectic gangsters and like high ranking people. Like, bro, keep going. You know what I mean? Like, tell these youth that, because the thing is, the ones that are at the top and who have been around, they know that it's not all it's cracked up to be, you know, because they've already seen everybody come and go. You know what I mean? If you've been in that life long enough, you'll see best friends fall out and, you know, best friends becoming worst enemies, and that loyalty is actually, it's only a word. You know what I mean? Like, it's all about, well, it's a dog eat dog world.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Where only the coldest survive and the weakest fold and crumble. You know, that's what it's about. You know what I mean? Like in prison, it gets to the point where it's the people around you that you got to watch out for most. Because if you step out of line, your boys will be the ones that are going to, that will deal to you, not the enemy. Your own boys will turn on you. So that's why a lot of the guys, you know, who are in those top positions wouldn't want that for a youth, you know what I mean, to even step into that world. But in saying that though, you do get, like, you know, I get members, you know, that tell me, you know, like, oh, my grandson wants to join, you know what I mean, but I don't want him to join, you know, so I block him. But there are those kids out there that just got nothing. They've got no parents, they've got no family. If their heart's set on becoming a member, they'll go that way, one way or the other. You know, even if they're told this or that. So there are kids that will inevitably join a gang because of what they've gone through in life. You know, and then that's when it comes back to, you know, making it better. You know what I mean? Like, you know, not everybody that joins a gang has to go to prison, you know, or even be a criminal. Like, man, in Australia, you see heaps of guys that are patch members that aren't criminals. You know, they just like hanging with the boys. And don't get me wrong, they might not be perfect. You know what I mean? They might like to party and do drugs and stuff. But they ain't actually out there like, you know, robbing and, you know what I mean, living that life. You know, some dudes just along for the ride, you know. And like a lot of people will tell you that, you know what I mean? Like, a lot of the times, like, it's only a small percentage of the club that actually is like deep in, you know, the gangster life. And a lot of them around are just there for the look, you know what I mean? The patch and the...
So interesting, because I know growing up, I'm born and raised in Mangere, like being in a gang was like, oh, he's in a gang, that's so cool. Like, how can we join the gang? And it's so cool that you're interviewing, you know, gang members who've been in the game for a long time, who are telling you to spread that message. It's not what it's made out to be. But also understanding that kids who are raised with, you know, no parents, or they don't have a sense of belonging or community, they find their place in a gang. And that's just a product of their situation, I'm guessing.
And that's the thing, like, so like gangs will never like disappear, you know what I mean? Because, well, like, you know, at the moment, and, you know, I don't want to like come off anti-government or anything like that, but like, you know, some of the legislations they're putting in place in regards to gangs and stuff, and, you know, the whole like being hard on crime and being hard on gangs,
banning gang patches in public,
all of those sorts of things, like, you know. But that stance, you know, like being hard on gangs, like, what about being hard on poverty? What about being hard on homelessness? You know, what about being hard on those things that cause the gangs? You know what I mean? Like, that's what they should be hard on. Like, let's, you know, try and get these kids out of poverty, and you know what I mean, like.
Absolutely.
Because the gangs are just a byproduct of that, you know what I mean? Like, they're not the cause, they're the effect of, you know, abuse and traumas. And so we need to be hard on those things, you know what I mean? Not hard on the gangs.
And also, like, I'm always interested in what rehabilitation looks like for prisoners. Like, because when they leave, do they go back to gangs? Some do, I'm guessing, or
most people would join the gang in prison. You know?
In prison, yeah.
Well, that's the thing as well. Like, well, because I can only speak on Australia, because obviously I never went to prison here. Have a lot of mates that have been to prison here, and that's a whole aspect of it as well. Because, like, when you look at it, how it's really meant to work is that the sentence is the punishment. Not the prison time, it's the sentence, whether it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, that's the punishment, not the prison itself. But see how people look at it is, the sentence is the punishment, but now they got to be punished in prison again. That's how society would look at it, you know, like they need to be punished while they're doing their time as well, to make them learn, you know what I mean? Like, that's how they look at it. But the thing is the sentence itself, that's the punishment. The prison part is meant to be the treatment and the rehabilitation, not punish again, you know, not take everything off them so that they're punished while they're doing their time as well, because then you're just going to get out worse. There's no two ways about that, you know what I mean? Like, there's no way you're going to, like, cage people up and, like, treat them like animals, and they're going to get out and be like, oh, okay, you know what I mean? Like, I'm better now. They're going to get out way worse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, and that's the thing, man. Like, you see a lot of people go into prison who have just made a mistake. They weren't criminals or nothing like that. They just made a mistake, like most people do. But then they go to prison and then they come out and now they are criminals.
Yeah.
Now, you know what I mean? Like, now, it's so tripped out in there.
Man, someone needs to overhaul that system. Like,
but so that's it in a nutshell, you know, like, all right, well, look at, is it Sweden or Switzerland? So they have the lowest recidivism rates in the world. So the lowest rates of reoffending. And when you look at their jails, they're like hotels.
I know, I saw it. They have like nice breakfast.
They're so good. And see, the thing is, then they get out and they never go back again. You know what I mean? Like, they don't go back to prison, even though it is good in there.
Yeah.
They never come back because they've had the treatment part. You know what I mean? Whereas over here, over in other places in the world, it's like, nah, that we don't want that for them in prison. But then they're going to get out and reoffend maybe even worse, you know? So it's like, I think like Sweden or Switzerland or wherever it is, they're the best examples, you know, that even though their jails are like hotels and things like that, it benefits the community in the long run because now they're getting out and they're not reoffending again.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, so, and that's the thing, because of the way that the media paints it and the way society looks, like, they need to be punished more. Because with these interviews, like with, you know, interviewing ex-criminals and, you know, ex-gang members and stuff, it does get a bit tough because, you know, a lot of us have victims, you know, of our crimes, you know, and, you know, sometimes people message through, like, and they're just like almost saying like, oh, this guy doesn't deserve to change. You know what I mean? Like, this guy doesn't deserve that. And it's like, man, it's such a twisted world, because it's like, well, then what would you rather? You know what I mean? Would you rather this guy gets out and does better for his family and becomes a positive role model? Or nah, he doesn't deserve that. Like, what? So he's going to just stay in the world of crime?
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So it's so like, it's definitely a tough one.
People need to extend empathy, and from a more Christian biblical perspective, there's something that I always remember, and it's God's heart for the restoration of broken people is generationally timeless. So I don't know why people are so fussed up about punishing people all the time. They're like, you deserve it. Like, I get it, the crime that they may have committed might have been hurtful, but sometimes we need to see beyond that. If we are thinking about everyone, you know, if we are thinking about
And because the thing is, like I said, like the sentence itself is a punishment. Because it doesn't matter if the prison's made out of gold. It's still a prison. You know what I mean? You don't got your freedom. You're being told what to do. Like, it's still tough. You know what I mean? It's still tough being away from your family and being locked in at a certain time. But yeah, unfortunately, people just want to see them punished even more. You know? So yeah, I guess it's the short-sightedness. So, you know, they don't look about it in the long run.
Yeah.
Like when you see a lot of like those serial killers in Australia, you know, like, I don't know if you've heard of them, like Ivan Milat, and these are quite well-known serial killers in Australia. But when you look at what they actually went through, like some of these guys came out of like the worst boys' homes, like notorious, you know what I mean? Like that's where they came out of, you know what I mean? And and that's not an excuse, obviously, but that's what more punishment leads to, you know what I mean? It leads to, oh, I know this guy just hates everyone now, you know what I mean? So he doesn't care, you know? And going to prison means nothing because he spent most of his life in there anyway, you know, so... Yeah.
So what are you looking forward to next?
Well, yeah, so I started the Hood Diaries.
Yeah.
So so with the Hood Diaries, I actually started that, I think, about 2 years ago. I did my first one in Mangaru. That was the first one I did. So that was actually a while ago now. So
shout out to Mangry.
Yeah. So I started doing that. Started doing that Hood Diary segment. But I sort of just started it off because at the time I was more focused on the interviews. But then I saw Spanian doing them in Australia. And he started doing those hood vlogs. So I thought, oh, I'm going to start doing them again. Yeah, I'm going to get back to it. So, so I sparked it up again and started going around. And that's been a blessing, though. You know, that's been a blessing, being able to travel around New Zealand, you know, and going to all these different neighborhoods. Yeah, that's been cool. Definitely will continue doing that.
Yeah. I know we talked about something on the phone yesterday that you wanted to be a spokesperson for.
Yeah. So this is something that I've just recently started coming out about. So it's a part of my testimony as well. So at the age of, I think I was 19, I developed erectile dysfunction. So looking back now, that was definitely traumatic in itself. So another bombshell as well was that I actually hadn't had sex before that. So I'm a virgin. So a lot of people are going to trip out on this. A lot of my followers, obviously. But I just want to be transparent. You know, I want to be transparent with people. And it's funny because, a little bit of backstory to it. So the first time I ever opened up about it was just recently, a couple months ago. And I was with one of the bros, a bro who I love dearly. And he was a high-ranking member of a gang here in New Zealand. And it's like I said, I do meet up with quite a few high-ranking people and just to chat and, you know. And but this one in particular was really wanting to change his life around. And one of his biggest struggles was with lust. So, you know, high-ranking gang member, you know, multiple girlfriends, you know, like that sort of a life. But he had been through abuses as a child. So he was really struggling with that. And it got to the point where he looked like he was about to tap out. You know, he was like, this is too hard, man. Like, I can't do it. And I told him, I was like, bro, this is my struggles, you know? And the reason I told him was because I wanted him to know, like, bro, don't think I ain't got my own struggles, you know? Like, man, my struggles are worse than your struggles, mate, you know? Like, I know you're struggling, bro, but, mate, look at me, you know? Look at what I'm going through. And I guess that's why I started telling other people as well, because I wanted them to know, like, bro, we all got our struggles, mate. You know what I mean? Like, don't look at me and think I ain't got my own struggles, you know? Man, my struggles are some of the worst struggles you could have, you know, looking at my situation. So that was one of the reasons that I opened up to people. Because I'll be honest, man, like, I've seen beautiful things happen from telling people on that one-on-one thing. because I just, yeah, I just sometimes they'll start looking differently at their own lives, you know, and think, man, that's your struggle. Like, man, that's a pretty big struggle, you know? Like me knowing that, you know, I could possibly never have a family. You know, and God is good, man. Who knows what my future holds, but that's the reality. I might not ever have a family. I might not ever have that for me. Another reason I wanted to open up about it is to tell people, especially the youth out there, because we're living in an over-sexualized world. You know, when I was young in high school, there was a lot of pressure, you know, in that realm of things. But now it's like off its head pressure, you know, because of TikTok and all of this stuff, social media. Like, everyone's in a rush to have sex, even more than what it was before. So I just want to put it out there as well. Like, yeah, I'm a virgin, but I'm still living my best life. You know, there's nothing that's been holding me back. It didn't hold me back when I was in prison, you know, climbing the ladder in there. And it's not going to hold me back from climbing the ladder out here either, you know. Yeah, and, you know, like the people I have, like, it's hard case because the people I have told, I'll be like, hey, bro, I'm going to start telling people this publicly, you know? And they're like, whoa, bro, slow down, man. You know what I mean? Like, bro, I don't know if you should do that. And I'm like, and even when we called yesterday, you know, I was telling you, like, oh, look, I want to speak about this. And you were like, are you sure you want to talk about that?
Is this normal?
Yeah. Like, are you sure you want to tell people that? Like, but it's like, yeah, I do, you know, because also as well, like, so more about me. So, like, even though I gave my heart to the Lord like 3-4 years ago, like, I've had relapses in that time, you know, and like with weed and alcohol and just little relapses in that. And I was always like, so the last time I relapsed was about 4 months ago. So I started drinking every day again and drinking quite heavily. And but the thing is, when I do have these relapses, like, I'm open about it, like with my church family. And I tell them, like, hey, man, you know, I'm struggling again. Like, I need prayer, you know, pray for me. And the last time I met up with a friend, a very good friend of mine who's sort of like a spiritual mentor, Martin. And we caught up and he was like, bro, what is it, man? Like, why do you keep relapsing? You know what I mean? Like, there's something that you're not talking about, you know? And that was all I could think of in my head. Was like, and it was like God was in my head, like, tell him, you know, tell him. Mind you, though, I'd never said this openly to anyone. This was something I thought I'd take to the grave pretty much. And so I was like, but he's like, bro, there's something you're not opening up about. And it's something, you know, it's traumatic, you know. And that was the thing as well. Like, I never looked at, you know, developing erectile dysfunction and things like that. I never looked at that as traumatic. I didn't look at it as a trauma. But now that I'm dwelling on it, it's sort of, it has been traumatic, you know, in different ways. But yeah,
Maybe you were good at, like, coping with it, but you didn't, you reckon?
Oh, yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, so, yeah, well, definitely coping with it, yeah. But yeah, I guess looking at it now, yeah, it has been traumatic. But the thing is, I look at it as well, like, because I'm so involved in my faith now and in God and in the Bible, like, I live my life by the Bible, you know what I mean? Like, my whole life is based around it. So when I look at it, like, to be honest, I look at it like I didn't really have a choice in this, you know what I mean? Like, even before that, like, before I was 19, like, there were moments where, because we used to go to brothels and stuff like that, even as a teenager and that. But every time I go in there, like, I just couldn't perform. You know what I mean? This was even before the erectile dysfunction. It was always it just never happened, you know? And looking back, that's what I mean. Like, I look back on it now and it's just like, it was almost my destiny. You know what I mean? Like, this is just what the plan was for me. You know, that's why I like, man, if there's anybody that had a reason to curse God, it's me. You know what I mean? Like, I could be cursing God all day. You know what I mean? I have the biggest reasons not to believe that God exists, and just being like, there's no God.
Yeah.
Man, look at me, man. There's no way there's a God. He doesn't love me. You know what I mean? Like, he doesn't love me if this is what I've got. But no, I don't look at it that way. You know what I mean? In Corinthians, in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, Paul talks about like boasting in our weaknesses. You know what I mean? Like, he talked about it. He was like, he talks about having a thorn in his side. You know what I mean? And how he asked God to deliver him from it. You know what I mean? And then God told him, like, pretty much no. You know what I mean? That my grace is sufficient. And he says, like God says, his strength is made perfect in our weakness. And man, that verse there speaks to me. You know, and then Paul goes on to say that he doesn't hide his weaknesses, he boasts in it. You know what I mean? He tells the world, you know?
That's strong.
And I remember I always used to read that verse, and that was what I'd think in my head, like my stuff. But I'll be like, oh yeah, nah, I won't be boasting in that. Yeah, I won't be telling people about that. And this wasn't even that long ago. And now look at me, I'm talking about it here. So I view that this was my destiny. You know what I mean? And this is what God's plan for me was. Because ultimately as well, God actually sees like someone who's a virgin and things like that, even though I might not really have had a choice in it. This is actually what God wants. He gives us a choice, don't get me wrong, because he's a good God. But he actually wants people to stay abstinent, and at least until they meet the right person anyway. You know what I mean? Like, this is actually what God wants. This is what God sees as like pure. You know, and what might look foolish to the world, like God actually sees that as like wise. You know what I mean? What looks weak to the world, God actually looks at it as strong. So, and then even, you know, it talks about in Revelations, like, so this is another one. In Revelations, it talks about, so in Revelations, that was John's visions that he had, and he wrote them down. And in those visions, he sees 144,000 virgins. And they're different to everyone else, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of interpretations of that verse, because most people would say, oh no, he wasn't talking about actual virgins though. But for me reading that verse, it's like, what if he was? Like, what if I'm one of those 144,000 that he's talking about, you know? Like, because like I said, when God called me, you know what I mean? Like, it was a huge spiritual experience, you know what I mean? When God came to me during that COVID period. And there was this one night, I don't know why, it was like 3 a.m, and I went to this local park in the area. And I stood there and I looked up at the moon, and then I saw like this white figure in the corner of my eye. Looked though, and there was nothing there. But he was coming from this bush track thing. This is pitch black at night. So I went through this. I stood at the edge of this bush track. I'm like, oh man, that's scary down there, you know what I mean? Like, it's fully black. I went down there and I walked, couldn't see nothing, scared as, like, just walking. And then I came to this clearing and I looked up, and there were like these stars sort of flashing in the sky. And that's what I mean, like, when I had those revelations, like, God spoke to me and he said, like, you're special. Like, I've actually got a plan for you, and it's not a small one. It's a big one. You know, I've got big plans for you. So that's why I want to be open as well, because at this point I've got no intentions of stepping backwards. You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to take on the world, you know what I mean? Like, not just New Zealand or Australia, but the world. So for me to do that, I just want to be transparent, you know what I mean, and show where I'm at. And like I said, you know, yeah, I have these conditions. Yeah, I'm a virgin even. But that ain't going to hold me back.
Yeah.
You know, that ain't going to hold me back from making the world stage And I say that humbly as well. You know what I mean? I say that humbly.
I think you say that with conviction of the Lord.
Yeah. Because even from the start, like, when hearing that voice of God, I knew I was going to do something with my life. You know what I mean? From that point on, I knew 100% I'm going to take on the world. I didn't know how. I don't know how I'm going to do it. But I trust in God that he's going to raise me up. You know what I mean? And even when I started in the social media realm, to me, it was just like I always viewed it as a vehicle for greater things, you know? I just didn't realize it was going to become such a powerful vehicle where sharing these testimonies and going around and people are like, bro, it's changed my life. You know, like hearing this guy's story, hearing that person's story, it's changed my life. Like I want to get closer to God now, or whatever higher power you want to call it, you know, like, but I want to change my life around. I didn't realize it was going to become like that, you know, but it was always a means to a greater end for me. And that's because, like me, I just want to preach the word of God. Like for me, that's what I'm here to do, to preach the word of God, because I believe that, first of all, I believe that we're coming to the end of the age here. That I believe that the stuff that's talked about in Revelations, I truly believe it's coming to pass as we're talking now. Like as we're talking now, there's a meteor passing the world right now, and the whole world can see it. This meteor hasn't been seen in over 80,000 years. Did you see it in the news in there?
No, I didn't actually.
Yeah, so right now there's a meteor passing in the skies. Hasn't been seen in 80,000 years. The whole world can see it right now. Even in America, they're talking about like, man, there's this comet passing. So I'm like, after this later tonight, I'm like going to Bethel's Beach and I'm like, gonna check it out.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Yeah. So there's all of these signs happening in the sky. And you know, when you read Matthew 24, all the signs he's talking about are things that are going to take place in the sky. So I'm like super excited. You know what I mean? I'm like, man, this is an exciting time to be alive right now. Like there are people like prophets and things that we read about in the Bible that would have loved to be alive
during
like
this time.
now.
Yeah, exactly.
Know? All of this stuff is happening in the world, exciting stuff. There was an aurora as well, like just the other day.
Yeah.
And like you could see it in Tikuiti. Like people were posting up photos, like there was all these lights in the sky and stuff like that. Like there's all of these signs and stuff happening. You know what I mean? So like it's like, man, get excited, Joe. Like it's, you know, it's gonna ramp up. So for me, because of all of these things and all of these signs, like I really want to like preach. Like man, sometimes I just want to jump in my car and like just start traveling New Zealand and like going to the town centers and just like preaching and stuff, you know what I mean? Who knows, that could be in the cards for sure, you know, like, but yeah, I want to start preaching the word of God, and because I think that a lot of it's been twisted now.
I think you're already doing that subliminally.
No, sure.
Like your content,
for sure.
you're bringing people who have been through broken things, and you're sharing how we should extend empathy to them.
Yeah.
That's godly work.
Yeah, nah, straight up. Big time. Yeah, no, straight up. And
because usually those people are outcasted.
Yeah.
You know, people hide their backs, clutch onto their purses. Yeah. So I think what you're really doing is godly work. Yeah. But
like even with the interviews, like I don't just interview Christians in that. You know what I mean? Like I interview Muslim. I've had Muslim brothers on there. You know what I mean? I've had people that believe all sorts of things. But you know, because ultimately as well, Jesus tells us to love our enemies. You know what I mean? Like we're meant to be loving everyone.
That's what makes Christians different.
Yeah.
Is our love extended regardless of what that person has done. Yeah. And that's your content.
Yeah. So that's definitely the goal for me. I just want to preach the word of God, which I've already been doing anyway.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like in the Bible, they had a different method. You know, they go out into town streets and yell it out.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean. Yeah, hard out.
But I think like we have an advantage today because we've got technology.
Yeah,
and things spread, you know, easily and fast. So.
Oh yeah, like if Paul and that or any of the disciples were alive right now, they'd be on TikTok.
Yeah, they'd be on TikTok screaming. That's what I'm saying. Like it's a new form of preaching and getting the word out. But honestly, I wish you the best on that journey, and I like your conviction. when you say, I don't know what it's going to be, but you set yourself up, Lord, use me. I don't care where you take me.
Yeah.
Just make sure I'm doing your will and I'm living to serve your kingdom. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Usually towards like the end of the show, thank you for sharing your story with us.
No, thank you for having me on.
That was amazing. And hope we do some more work together.
Yeah,
That'll be
I'm
awesome.
sure we will. I'm sure we will. And yeah, I just guess it just goes off. I did a post on this yesterday, actually. Don't worry about what people think about you. That's the biggest one. You know, don't go through life worried about what people are going to think of you. Like, I get a lot of people when they tell me, like, well, I had a guy yesterday, and he goes, man, I wish I could be on social media. He goes, but I don't because I'm a perfectionist. You know, like, when I'm in the editing, I overthink it and stuff like that. So he was saying it's the editing process. But I go, it's not the editing process. What you're worried about is what people will think of you.
Yeah.
That's why you go overboard on the editing stuff, and then you don't end up putting it out there because you think it's not perfect. But that's not actually the cause of it. The cause is because you're worried what people are going to say about you when you do it. Don't worry about what people think about you. You see so many people, especially in the social media space, that break down because of the comments, you know what I mean? Because they're getting negative feedback and stuff like that. Man, don't worry about any of that. You know, like you see people, man, it gets to the point where they're almost like begging, like, oh, please don't say anything negative, you know what I mean? And it's like, man, now they're going to go even harder on you, you know what I mean? Like, don't worry about like what people think about you, you know, like be confident in yourself. When I started in this social media space, I'll tell you now, it was hard, you know, because coming from that background of gang and prison and this and that, it's real, like you don't say nothing, you know what I mean? You don't speak about anything. So when I did start on this, there was a bit of division, even with my own friends. Some people were saying do it, some were like, bro, don't do it. But at the end of the day, I had to just step out on my own. You know what I mean? Don't be scared to step out on your own. And the thing is, a lot of those naysayers in the beginning stages, now they all reach out and say, bro, good on you. You know what I mean? Like, and that's why when you do something and you stick to it, people will respect you. Doesn't matter what it is. Eventually, people will respect you because they'll be like, this guy actually made something of it. So don't worry about what people think. Go hard. And yeah, like I said, you know, I'm only getting started. You know, I truly believe that the whole thing up to this stage with what I've been doing is just me warming up. No, I'm still stretching. So yeah, I'm just excited for the future, and yeah, and much love to everyone that supports me, you know, and I know that I've just dropped some bombs on there as well. So yeah, I'm excited, nervous, but excited because, yeah, people are going to trip. You know, people are going to trip out. But like I said, I'm living my best life. I'm happy. Yeah, God bless.
God bless. Thank you, David, for coming to the show.
Awesome. Woo! That's all right.